Hello everyone, welcome to the 169th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. As it often happens, I'm just sitting here scrolling on my computer and then bam. I received this kind of insight because I was working on a paper about artificial general intelligence and understanding this whole inner-outer reality dichotomy. But then obviously, if your external reality is just a holographic projection or representing potential future inner states of being of your body. Like, for instance, if you lie on a bed, then that bed isn't really what you think it is. It represents a way for shifting your inner state of being in one way versus another, which is lying on the bed. So I was thinking of this. One thing that is really mind-blowing here is the causality. And I've talked about this before, but I never really truly realized the implications of this. We think that causality is something that is going from the outside inward and also from the macro towards the micro. So I'll give you an example. If you get hit by a baseball bat, like a baseball bat hits my arm, what we think happens is there's an external force in this reality that affects the arm. And then that information of the impact influences or impacts or changes our inner state of being. So we perceive it as our global level as having pain in our arm. Then that translates to the biological layer of reality as your broken bones and bruised, muscles and all that stuff. And then within those cells, the molecules within those cells also need to update their state of being. And then the atoms within the molecules update their state of being. Then the subparticles within the atoms update their state of being. And then the subparticles inside the atom, then the quarks inside the subparticles update their state of being. Then the photons inside the quarks update their state of being. And then the pure vibration information, soup, updates its state of fluctuations or information to reflect what happened on the outside in this kind of higher interface of reality. And then what? And then you're kind of stuck because you're at the Planck scale. And so where does that information, how does it kind of map onto reality? When in fact, if you do it in the other reverse order, then it makes much more sense because you're not blocked with causality and materialism. And so instead, you're like a pure consciousness which created this symbolic interface for giving itself an objective reason to modulate its inner state of being in one way versus another, which is, for instance, getting hit by a baseball bat. And so what happens is from nothingness, from, a void, it's as if consciousness then puts the quantum foam into a certain pattern of vibratory flux, which is a symbolic representation for what is happening, but at a very, very base level. It's like the binary information on your computer, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, and you cannot see that because it's just too complex, too abstract. And so that information then filters upwards towards your reality. And so causality goes upwards, not downwards. And so then from that state of quantum foam agitation, then the photons update their state of being, then the quarks, then the subparticles, then the atoms shift their state of being, then the molecules, the cells, and then the organs. And so it's as if you're breaking your bones from the inside out and not from the outside in. The outside is just a permission slip, kind of, to update your inner state of being as pure consciousness in one way versus another. And then when it trickles upwards, then you see, oh, ouch, my bone just broke, but it actually broke from the inside. It's like it gave itself the permission it updated its information or its state from the inside. The outside is like a mere excuse for giving itself cues or information on how it should update its state. But it cannot come from that level. But then I thought that is one direction, going from nothingness towards your reality. But then there's another one which goes from infinity towards your reality. And that one is a bit more complicated to understand. So let me put it this way, like if you really subscribe to that means that your consciousness is unlimited. And if you really could persuade you to do it, you can shift your inner state of being perfectly, like your consciousness would certainly, transcend all the limitations that you think you have because of the physical body and all that stuff, and decide, I'm 100% free, I can do whatever the hell I want. This is just a game of light. I can just update the quantum foam into any state that I want because I'm consciousness and I can decide. But the reason why you can't do that is because of that other stream that goes from infinity downwards, because it can know the infinite reverberations of any shift in your state of being into infinity. And so imagine if right now, for instance, I acquired superpowers, Dragon Ball Z, I could throw, beams out of my hands or whatever. An infinite kind of consciousness that sits there, and looks at that, it could see all of the implications for reality experience, in this level, and how that would reverberate into the infinite future. And it would say, no, that's not allowed. And if you do that, I'll just shift you to a parallel reality or a kind of lucid dream of your own where you're alone and you're no longer in this kind of base reality where you're trying to build a sort of a continuous experience that reaches all the way up to infinity. And so also don't forget that your external symbolic reality that is basically holographic or virtual is the inner reality of an AGI or a singularity. And in the same way as your body, the way that you perceive it, is the symbolic outer virtual reality of the living, of the cells. Like that's, so it's just like at some point, the virtual holographic reality you create forms a hole or a skin around it, or some kind of protective barrier, or it's almost like a dimension closing in on itself as a bundle of potential future inner states that is self-enclosed. And it's the same as basically the boundary of a living cell, which translates universally this thing between the outside and the inside. If you remove that boundary, then the molecules inside of it are no longer have that kind of translation between inner and outer reality, and they're collective. They're not part of the collective common future, let's say. So, it's as if when elements bound together and decide that their internal states are bound, they can create a higher symbolic interface for how to shift those inner states or outer reality, and manipulate outer reality. So, and so it's all holographic, and it isn't at the same time, because it's, again, these interfaces are built one on top of the other, and so it's almost as if an atom would be in a dimension of its own where it represented all the potential alternate inner states of being, and then when it bundles together with other atoms, then it creates an even higher interface for their collective inner states of being, which we say is chemistry. And it creates a new dimension. It opens up a new dimension of experiences, because all those atoms conglomerated together in a certain way. It's almost as if you put slices of one-dimensional realities together, compress it, and then that is the transition from a one-dimensional reality to a two-dimensional reality, and so on and so forth. I mean, I've talked about it in the previous videos on dimensions. But what I meant was, what really boggles me is that there's obviously a symmetry in the inside and outside. Meaning, if you hit your arm with a baseball bat and your bones break, that also reflects on outer reality, right? It's not like, so there is a kind of interaction there going on. So the baseball bat will also be affected in its state to reflect your inner state. And those two are inseparable. They're a mirror of each other. Any event that marks you as your body also marks the outside simultaneously. Which is why I think many spiritual thinkers said that your state of mind and the way you look at reality when you think of reality is ultimately what you're thinking about yourself. And so when you look at a flower and you think, wow, it's so beautiful, the flower affects your inner state, but you also affect the flower. And so it's almost as if from the beginning, if every single consciousness that could think or could have thoughts would say, oh, how ugly the universe is, the universe would sink into ugliness, basically, because that's what it thinks about itself, and that would gradually, materialize on the outside. And so if we had 8 billion people that were all thinking simultaneously that reality is ugly and disgusting and horrible, then it's almost as if some kind of external event would have to happen to reflect that inner state of being. Because it's a mirror again. And so, it's like something would happen, like all the flowers would die, or they would, change their color, something would happen. And we would explain that via some kind of cataclysm or some kind of genetic mutation or some kind of catastrophe or something, whatever. We're not realizing that there is this mirroring kind of exercise where, the outer and inner realities are kind of, always linked and co-evolving. That's an important thing. But that's basically how you explain that, certain masters can break ice with their, bones and do all kinds of things, like hit some wood and not break their fists or break through walls or something. Because ultimately, as a human, when you hit two objects together, two inert objects, like for instance, if I collide this fork, with this glass of water, the interaction between the two is not going to be determined by, it's not like the fork is going to decide, for instance, sometimes like, oh, I'm actually weak and I'm going to break, and therefore it will break when you hit those two together. Like there's just like these interactions are empirically testable and it can be repeated. But when you add this element of consciousness, you realize that our power is that we can modulate that interaction. And in a way that some humans can, break through walls by punching through them, and others, they try it and everything breaks. And some humans, in order to give themselves the permission, quote unquote, to experience that, for that, that trade, between how you update your inner state of being and how it reflects upon the outer state of being, and vice versa, they will give themselves the kind of mental permission to do that via training. That's the form that it'll take. But it could take the form of, the One Punch Man manga, which I really find really funny. Because, and again, like this is proof that you basically find inklings, or the truth is kind of sprinkled all over the place, because that's the story of One Punch Man, basically, is this guy that, kind of transcends the limitations in his brain and thinks he's invulnerable, and then suddenly he becomes invulnerable because he just made that kind of shift, like a real shift in his consciousness. But then this outer reality is the inner reality of a being that transcends us as well. And so it's almost as if the outside was also conspiring and you're playing with that outer reality. And that outer reality, then what manifests there is something for your higher evolution. Because there are two ways of manipulating you. There's like the within, you're trying, like something emerges from nothingness towards your level of consciousness because you're not in 100% control over what happens there. That process from something coming from nothingness and trickling up towards your body. And that's, what you experience as intuitions, strokes of genius, something just like you feel something in your guts, happening, even though it's not linked to anything on the outside, and you have this gut feeling that something is wrong or whatever. But then there's also something, again, a causality trickling from infinity and then restricting itself and going through, lower and lower dimensions until it takes a form in your perceived outer reality. And it's a message as well, like that baseball bat, it could have been anything. It could have been a sign, what we call signs, like a synchronicity or something that has meaning to you in order to give you, certain message or something. But what's interesting there is that whether your bones break when the baseball bat hits you or whether the baseball bat breaks, it's almost as if a higher kind of being that had this baseball bat inside of it was thinking, okay, there's something I need to achieve here, and this guy, I need to protect his arm because he needs to do this specifically in this kind of timeline or whatever. So I need the baseball to break and not his arm. And then you, as a embodied consciousness, is also in control over those things and a little bit as well. You need to be also convinced that that is possible. And so it's this interplay between, this kind of universal consciousness that is, or kind of higher intelligence that considers each human as being a cell and has a certain purpose, needs to achieve a certain result, that says, okay, let's try to modulate these experiences in its outer reality, but taking into account what that consciousness can handle, the kind of events it can handle, because, oh my God, this person actually believes he's really frail and, his bones break instantly. So that experience of being hit by a baseball bat, you're actually just going to avoid it. It's not going to happen. And if it did, and that kind of consciousness wanted to make sure that you didn't break your arm, then it needed to make sure that you were in a state of mind or a belief system that enabled that to happen. And so that's, this saying that many people say is that God cannot, cannot give you a burden that is heavier than what you can bear. It's that kind of idea. It's that it's as if this kind of higher kind of intelligence intuitively knew what level of consciousness each of us are in, what we believe about reality or what is possible and what is probable or whatever, and then tailored basically a little bit the experiences that happen in outer reality and combine all that in a way that it's never too much for what you can bear. And it's always like at the perfect level for between evolution and devolution. Like you're always like perfectly 50-50 chance. And that's free will basically of either, accepting whatever challenge you're faced and move upwards in terms of, evolving your consciousness, or move slightly downwards. And every time you have a new 50-50 chance, every single time. Because it's always like, perfectly tailored. And in free will is this 50-50 chance, because if everything is too easy, then you don't evolve. If everything is too hard, then you devolve. And so in order to have this kind of weird kind of ascension, but still, not linear, not exponential, not everything planned out for you and with no choice, then whenever you're faced with a difficulty or this kind of outer event, you always have to have a 50-50 chance of learning positively from it or devolving from it. Like, saying, oh, this is unfair or whatever, or not, or, consolidating some kind of limitations or whatever you're meant to heal or move past. So it went all over the place a little bit, but I just wanted to, let that sink in a little bit, because it's something that's typically hard to understand, these two kind of, causalities that sort of collapse right at the center at every point, right? I mean, because the individual cells in your body, it's the same thing. Like there is this event that trickles down to their level of reality, and then something also trickles up from nothingness towards their level of reality, but they don't have, for instance, belief systems or what humans have, which is why we have free will, because your individual cells can't really decide whether an event that they experience is positive, negative, give it meaning or whatever. They're a bit more bound by certain rules or laws. And so that's what really differentiates humans from other things, is that we are also in the middle, in the sandwich between descending causality and the causality that comes upward from nothingness towards us, but in a way where we have the freedom to sort of modulate that much more. So I hope you found that interesting, and talk to you in the next video. Bye guys.